Alright guys, got some schmutz on my face. I remember when I was learning to weld, the toughest thing was just running passes over and over and over again in the garage with no real concept of what I was going to build or where this was going or what I could do with it. So I really started getting interested in welding when I got some projects. So I'm trying to come up with some cool projects that you guys might want to weld at your own shop. Something above and beyond you could do with just a simple grinder and some hand tools. I've got some specialized equipment here. I can bend and cut and design some pretty complex stuff that you could weld in your own shop, and kind of together we can make something really cool. So this is what I'm saying. I'll bend this stuff up and basically send you this stack of parts right here so you guys can build them yourself. Check out the link down in the description. So let me just show you kind of how that works, and hopefully this is kind of a fun project for all you guys. If you caught last week's video, we generated the files for this Thor hammer project. We spent a little time in Fusion 360 in their sheet metal module, showing you how to basically generate flanges and all these little pieces that we're going to eventually bend up in the sheet metal brake. It is basically the easiest way to figure out how this stuff is going to bend up and what sort of weld joints you're going to have at the end, how tight your tolerances are. So we worked that all up in the computer, so hopefully this all goes really smooth and this thing actually works out. Before we put it in the finger brake, have to kind of work through here, get all the slag off because it'll chew up the teeth on the brake if we just go straight for it. And I'll do the same to all the parts in the kit. They'll be all cleaned up, ready to go. Now we got the parts clean. Cruise on over here to the finger brake. This is a very particular type of brake. If you notice, there's a bunch of little fingers is what they're called. Basically those little slanted pieces of metal that clamp down on the sheet metal. Those are made so that you can remove them, spread them apart, and make open spaces for, it's really for making boxes and pans. So when you get two sides bent up, like here we're going 245s to end up at 90, and we do the other side. Once you get two sides bent up and you try to go bend that third side, those two arms that you just bent up will end up hitting the brake. So that's why they make this style of brake with the fingers on it. You can move around and make a little bit of space for you to bend up more complex things, basically. We got it used. It's a jet actually, but I spent quite a few hours getting everything cleaned up and oiled and straightened out again, and then we put some paint on it. Just have a little pride in our shop. So now this is where you can see we removed some of those fingers to make room for those side panels now that are bending up and would eventually start hitting the brake if we didn't remove those fingers first. So I'm not using the gauge anymore. I'm really just getting these tight because the computer should have figured out those angles for us already, and they should be bang on perfect. So I'm just basically using the piece as the jig. This right here is what's going to come in the kit. I've got two of these pieces here that both go together to make one hammerhead. And then it was kind of boring, so I decided to add a little bit of texture. We've got a few more pieces here for depth. Each of those rectangles go behind that panel. Makes it look kind of cool, but don't quite have it all there. We do need one more thing, and that's a handle. I think I'm going to end up adding a little tube cap end so that you guys can cap the end of this tube. Or I may even 3D print a cool little cap that slides on the end. If these start getting popular and people start buying them basically off the website, then it'll be time to spend some more energy and make this a little bit nicer kit. But for now, I think this is a really interesting idea, and these Thor hammers are just freaking cool when they're all done. So first step is you're going to need to kind of tack this thing together. I started these corners right here. It's the biggest piece that's left hanging there. All the other stuff is those little tiny flanges that make the end. Same here on the other side. See, I overbent it a little bit. So I'm just going to peel it out. These are not CNC bent in a special brake. They're just done by hand, as you can see, with a Harbor Freight gauge. They're not going to be totally perfect, but the CAD file is perfect. So with a little bit of finagling, you should be able to get all these joints really nice and tight and ready to weld. But I'm showing you the long version here. I could have edited this out and made it look a lot faster and a lot more fun than it really is, but that's not really fair either, because there are some challenges to fitting up sheet metal, and I figured I'd kind of show you guys some of the tricks of the trade. This is just the first little trim piece. It goes on the top. You could go corner to corner and find center and get it perfectly lined up. It's just an aesthetic thing, so I just kind of cheated this one. The handle will be really noticeable if it's off, so I'll spend a little bit more time when we get to that. But once you get that tacked in, you can get going on the second interior panel piece. Make sure you don't wait until the end, because once you get these two halves kind of clamshelled together, there's really no more access to get that back panel in there without putting some weld on the front. And I'm trying to hide as much weld behind the face as possible, A, so that there's less grinding, and B, it'll just make it look cleaner at the end if we can hide as much as possible inside of this thing. It doesn't take much. It's not a super structural component. If you're planning on really, beating the heck out of this thing, you may want to run a couple of little 1-inch stitches on there just to keep everything together, because tacks can break loose with extended vibration especially. But if it's going to be on your wall, a few tacks, guys, nothing crazy required. It's not like a big structural piece. It's just something kind of fun to play with and look at and show your friends. My favorite thing about this hammer is everybody that sees it has to grab it. You just cannot keep your hands off of it. Alright, so once you get both halves as they're two separate pieces, it's time to start putting these together. You just flip one over the other. And for welding, it's all about the seam preparation. So it'll save you guys a lot of trouble if you spend a little extra time on the fit up side of this. It'll make welding it so much easier. So just get one corner at first, and then work yourself to the opposite side. Don't quite go diagonal to the other corner yet. Just work on one seam at a time. Just get that seam closed up all the way down. And again, you're just going to have a little bit of faith in the actual CAD file, because as we flip this over, stuff looks a little bit off, but since the pieces are dimensionally accurate out of the table, with a little bit of finagling, you can get all these gaps closed up to a reasonable level. I use 2 F-style clamps, seem to be the best. If you have C clamps, those will work as well. You could probably even get away with some quick clamps, like some R11s, but you don't quite have the same fine-tuning control here. And as I tighten down on this clamp, you can see that gap get tighter. And that's really what I like for sheet metal stuff, is I like to be able to kind of screw that thread and sneak up on that fitting. Make sure it's nice and tight. So before you let the clamps off again, you want to nail this down. Work your way down to the other end of that same seam and get it all closed up. And this camera has a terrible time autofocusing, so just bear with me here, guys. But you can watch, just use those clamps to get everything sucked in nice and tight how you want it. And now that looks like a nice tight weld seam right there. Ugh! What happened? Oh no! What can we do? It's ruined. We're never gonna get it now. I just wish I could figure out how to... Oh, wait a second. I've dealt with this before. Grab a scrap piece of anything out of your shop and tack it to that low spot. So if you have a high spot, you can always just grab a beater and beat the living hell out of this thing until it decides to cooperate. But if you have a low spot, how do you pull on that metal? You see with that tack there, I can peel and pull that piece out while I'm tapping, trying to get it to basically pop past that lip that it's hanging on. So you see me beating that lip back while I pull. and right there we close that gap. At least on that one side it's now flush with the face where we want it, and now we can close up that seam on the other side because we're at the right elevation. We're in plane, so to speak. So now as you tighten down that clamp, all those ugly gaps go away. Clamp it the other direction, close up the rest of it. And we should watch all those gaps just slowly disappear. Put another tack and lock it in so it doesn't sneak away from you. This is a great skill builder, guys. There's a lot of times where you're going to need to use all of these kind of techniques with multiple clamps. You have to get something square that's diagonal using beater, prying, tacking, grinding, all that good stuff. So I think this is a good skill builder for you in your shop. So right now I'm just going through and I'm trying to tighten up all these gaps. You see how that is a little high right there? That corner is flared out just a little bit, and I want to tighten it up. So feel free to use your beater. That's really the best tool in the shop anyways. It's the most fun for sure. And what better way to make a beater than with another beater? It's like the internet's about to explode. So the cool thing about these is a lot of times if you just tack it, you can break it loose. I put kind of a industrial structural tack on there, so couldn't quite peel it off. But that works for anywhere you have a low spot. So see, I noticed that other corner is also a low spot. Same thing there, just use that same piece of scrap material, tack it on, and then you can peel that out exactly where you want it and get it locked in place before you go to weld out this whole thing. Let it cool, because while it's still hot, it'll usually just pop right back off of there again. It's getting hung up on that lip, so I'm just beating that back while I peel it up, and eventually it comes out flush. Hold a little bit of tension and tack it down. There we go, that one was loose. Just pop it right off. You're gonna grind the heck out of this thing anyways once it's all welded down. So it's really no big deal to put a couple extra tacks here and there. Now it's time for the best part, weld out. This is really where you get to test how well you fit this thing up. You can see in a couple of these spots I'm having to trigger that MIG welder. I'm having to let it off and cool down so I can deposit a little bit more metal. Just these corners aren't super tight, so this would be a good spot to pull out your TIG, start messing with your pulse settings, really getting control over your pedal and feeding that filler wire as fast as you can. Or on these nice long seams you can really get rolling. No big deal, nothing special here. I think I was running about 18.5 volts, somewhere around 180 inches a minute on my Miller 350P. But you can really weld this out with anything. Stick might be a little tricky, but MIG or TIG definitely. Check and make sure you got everything welded out entirely. And now I'm finding center. You just go corner to corner and it gives you a quadrant. There's a hole there so you can't actually see your perfect center, but it's enough to look over from the top once you get that tube on there and get everything lined up. Just because it gets painfully obvious if this is off center, guys. Ask me how I know. May have rushed a couple of these trying to figure all this out. Ideally for tubes, you actually want 3 tacks instead of 2, because it can still peel on you a little bit. But I was just kind of cruising, so I stopped at 2. Another cool idea would be to kind of put some little handle details in it with the welder. Make it look pretty neat, I think. Once you got everything welded out how you like it, it is time to grind, my friends. This is where you're looking for slag inclusions, impurities, any sort of holes, pock marks, undercut. These are all the things that'll become really evident once you start grinding.
All right, guys, that's it. Thor hammer, weld your own kits in the bag. Go check them out on the website. Let me know what you guys think. I really want to make more of these kits to help you guys kind of have fun welding. And let me know what you guys think you might want to see next in a kit. More than happy to work it up. Keep making cool stuff.